Okay. Excuse me. Alright, let's see. Alright, I think this should be a good song. Hello everyone, welcome to tonight's episode. I wanted to speak about an idea which I think is eventually people will need to speak about it, and we need to, as a species, literally find a room where we're not killing ourselves, killing each other in, and just to find a strategy towards this. The title is A Time for Global Activity and Neo-Transformations, and I want to share this idea from a viewpoint perhaps you may have not heard. Ever since 2014, when I began these talks, I became aware of a situation. This situation was pretty much how 8 billion eyes were in one world, but we're not seeing the same world. When we wonder about a global activity, that means we're wondering about all activity on the globe. The United Nations is not enough. And there needs to be more of a global initiative. Because in some sense, we have to identify not as what we are in order to be something new. And so the unique test, the challenge, I guess, in some sense, is that every human being is seeing, in accordance to their DNA, their circuit of experiences, it's kind of like a story the Buddha said. They bring this elephant and they blindfold a bunch of people and they touch the elephant. And different one of them thinks that, one of them touches the leg of the elephant, think it's a column. One of them touches the trunk of the elephant, thinks it's a hose. One of them touches the stomach of the elephant, thinks it's a wall. And so eventually they would realize that it is one elephant, but it is not conceivable because we each get to see a little chunk of it. What I feel is the efficient decision that human beings, it doesn't matter what civilization, it doesn't matter if it's happening on Earth or it's happening somewhere where we can't see. What it is that creatures pop out of existence. As Alan Watts kind of said it very interesting. He said, it's like, you see how apples, like that tree appled? It was like suddenly the world peopled and people emerged. And so there's 8 billion of us on this rock in the middle of nowhere, and we're kind of wondering, what do we do? What is the strategy? And so I thought the strategy was ideological only. I can tell you that my findings in 2018 to 2020 has in some sense made me aware that human beings are not here to just be rational robots and machines. So the more we design our society as like a robotic and mechanical society, not that there's anything wrong with technology. It's like we're alive once, we want to see how far the technology goes. It's about how the technology is used that's of concern. So anyways, I'm saying that imagine you're a scientist, for example, and you conducted this experiment and you found like this next level accurate experimental results. And you want to take this experimental results to the world, but you go and see how are people living in the world. People are not living like scientists. They are not living like philosophers. They're not living in one modality. We are kind of like a liquid, but the container is our ecosystem. And so some people, they take the shape of their ecosystem. Some people, they don't take the shape of their ecosystem, And so that scientist that scientist in some sense would be bringing back that accurate result. The scientist has done a good job, but it's that people are emotional, and emotion means that we are touched by abstract realities as well as tangible and observable, like physical realities. So that means you can be pushed physically, and someone can say, "Hey man, you're nothing," and you can be pushed in your inner realms into an image. But when you know you're not an image, then you find the comfort. That's when it becomes easy walking on the world, because the complexity also emerges from the easy. That means the hardest things that I did in my life, or when I was younger, so many things that I felt were hard. It's just like after a couple of years, your eyes see more of the picture, so they have more of a navigation, more of a sense of the wheel. So, in other words, a global activity, now we have an opportunity to have a global activity of minds. And I feel the internet is a strange sign. The internet is pointing to this position of reality in the future, that people are not just what they are also what they do. Do you see? That's the difference. That's the awareness that I find much of the youth doesn't care. They don't care for what they do simply because they don't care for where they are. If you notice, it's like, it's so much, it's always easier to party at someone else's house. I feel a global activity, we haven't seen it yet. I feel that people cannot judge the potential of this civilization simply because they haven't seen what it will do. And so all that Mr. Within is saying is that while you're alive, see what you can do. Forget the voices that come and go. So many voices come and go. Do you know? I've had even sometimes strange moments where it was as if in one moment a person I cared about was giving me one kind of advice. Then the second time I was in that situation, the person was giving me totally different advice. And so I realized viewpoints change. Right now, as I'm speaking, I'm just a person who, in some sense, feels that like, how can I tell you? The inner realms are observable. I observe my inner realms. So, welcome to the chat section, guys. I'm going to share a story with you, Abraxas, in the chat section. This story, guys, it's actually in the poetry of this man named Hafez Shirazi. Hafez. Hafez. Different people spell it differently. Hafez was the Sufi mystic, if I'm correct, about 700 years ago or something. And in Persian culture, they read his poems during the New Year. They just every person picks a random one of his poems, and it's kind of like your fortune in that moment. Like, there's a sort of supernatural playfulness with the act. Like you were destined to pick up this poem. Anyways, I read the whole book. And when I read the whole book, there was a poem, there was a story he was saying through his poetry, sharing through his poetic imagery, Hafez. And he said he was one night, check this out, he's with his disciple, like at some place, and he suddenly, in his heart, he says, "From the eyes of my heart, I saw a soul crying out to God." That means, so imagine Hafiz is like sitting at a dinner table or something, and suddenly he gets a vision, and he gets this vision that there's this slave back in the day. The story's from 700 years ago. Back in the day, this slave has ran away from these cruel slave owners, and he's ran away and come to some cave, and Hafez, in his inner vision, sees that if he doesn't send his disciple to get this guy will in some sense be found by the cruel masters. Do you know? So Hafez gets suddenly, imagine like some dude's praying for his life, like, God, get me out of this hell, please, don't let them come back and take me, like the slave is praying in a cave, and Hafiz, like in the middle of, not in the middle of dinner, but like in the middle, he says, with his heart, with the eyes of his heart, he suddenly heard, he suddenly saw that, in some sense, being crying out. And so he suddenly gets this vision and he tells his disciple everything, and he says, you have to he gives him like an exact GPS location to his disciple. And he tells his disciple, you have to exactly go there and you have to get this guy before, in some sense, the masters come and get him or something. And so what happens is that he says, but he tells the disciple, but like as if like the logos instructed him to tell the disciple this. And in some sense, he says to the disciple, you can't talk to this guy. You have to go bring him here, but you're not allowed to speak to this guy. And Hafiz's disciple has seen enough from Hafiz to know, to listen. And so he, in some sense, he goes. He gets on a horse and quickly runs, and he's excited. He's like, oh my God, what if this is true? This guy's, in some sense, we're going to save this guy's life and bring him out of that hellhole, And so what happens is that the disciple gets to the cave, and he's about to say, we're here to save you, God, man. He goes to the exact location. It was like Hafiz's eyesight from his heart was like pretty accurate. His heart's eyesight was pretty accurate. And suddenly the disciple realizes he can't say a thing. And the slave in the, what do you call it? The slave in the cave who's praying doesn't know this is a different guy than the cruel masters. And he realizes he can't, and it's this weird moment where the disciple ties his hands, to like the horse, and they're going. And as they're going, I mean, it's weird that the slave doesn't realize it's a different direction than where he ran away from. But in some sense, as they're going, the guy whose hands are tied, the slave who doesn't realize they're actually Hafiz and this guy are actually saving him, and so what happens is, in that moment, the situation is very intense. And the guy whose hands are tied to the horse being pulled by the horse, he's like, no, I don't want to go back to this hell. I don't want to go back to this hell. And the disciple just has tears in his eyes. The disciple just is crying, like this grown man crying. And then he realizes the teaching he was meant to receive. And the moral of the story is that the guy on the horse, the disciple, the moral is from his eyes. And the disciple says that it's like this guy doesn't realize the suffering he's going through, but how close his victory is, how close his success is. That guy was thinking, no, I'm going back to this hard suffering, going back to this hell, not realizing he was actually going out of it. So we have to some degree, have the strength of an advanced civilization if we are to build one. That means if somebody comes and says, hey, Mr.Within, you built an advanced civilization, man. I would say, in some sense, we have to find ways to find the strength to build it. And the strength has to come from agreement. And so pretty much an advanced civilization would be the most efficient way 8 billion beings are speaking the same language. Our advanced civilization, this might be a very interesting idea, but it could be like a neo-transformation. I'm going to explain later on what I mean by that. But it's like, it could be such a revolutionary change in the system that it changes the whole system. That means human beings can realize that they are not just you're not just matter right now. Like, you can see the matter. You're seeing the matter with material eyes, with physical eyes, you're seeing physicality. But how light enters the eyes, and there is the emergence of a free will. You tell me light beams are entering our eyes and free will is everywhere? You see, it's a unique emergence. So I feel that the species right now hasn't looked at the picture properly, so every man is running for themselves in the battlefield. And what is this battle? This battle is the language war. The language wars. It's the battle of this, which story is going to rule them all at the end of the day. Do you know? And so we will realize the story that will rule them all is the new. It's the one that breaks rulers of all times. Like the ones you find in the store and also the ones you find in history. The human being doesn't know, guys. That's the thing. We are strangely, like, on some level, I feel like my conscious waking state is access to a world tangible, observable enough to engage. But on some level, the ambience, the mystery, the background unknownness of how the known is instantly there makes me feel that it's like we are a higher dimensional being, but trying to interpret ourselves through lower dimensional languages. And so that higher dimensional being, I feel, is going to be an incredible time. Can you imagine, being a group of the greatest philosophers sitting down, and the whole world is watching their conversations, and it's being this philosophical debate about when will human transformation come? When will we observe identity from a higher dimensional viewpoint? Because if you look at it, when you were young, maybe the game billiard was intimidating to you when you couldn't even see the table. But when you see, for example, like, in some sense, years later, you realize it's you suddenly find your skill, you find your familiarity, and what is strange is that it's not just us here. That's the good thing. That's the good thing, because I'm not saying it's not just us here. I mean, of course, there's so many kinds of animal species, the various kingdoms, the mineral kingdom, animal kingdom, plant kingdom. So there are various classifications of how intelligence has appeared to us. But when I say when Terence McKenna says there's another tenant in the room, what he means, this scholar, what he means is that it's not just all human activity. Now, we don't want to say it's something else. We just want to say for now, we don't know. That don't know shouldn't constantly be replaced with a belief. That means it doesn't help you. It's like, after some point, the explorer knows more than everyone. Not that he knows more than everyone. The fact that there is something new seen, a new additional dimension to the system, changes the system. It's like a new kid entering the class. It's like the human species being ahead of all the other species. So it is a time to look at the globe and realize its unknown movements and known movements. And what is known, we comprehend through language. What is unknown, we have no other way of exploring the unknown than experiential. And so really what it is we have access to multiple ways of characterization. What does that mean? That means, I've looked at the mirror, how many different days I've looked at the mirror just in the morning when I wash my face, where it's like, I'm like, who am I? And that question is very interesting to me, because it means we are not a static phenomena. They asked Buckminster Fuller, what do you think God is? And he's like, God's not a noun, it's a verb. They asked Alfred Whitehead, do you think people are just particles in space? He's like, no, it's the process. So we are realizing that an advanced civilization is an advanced process, and because we're creatures of balance, we have to some degree, have this advanced civilization be able to balance itself. And what is that? The balance of what viewpoints, in some sense, or ideas or visions, in some sense, echo on, and what doesn't. That means, like, I honor the mystic, but does it mean that every moment of your life, everything has to be 100% unknown? No. this global activity is no longer creating, I think it's going to be an advanced product of the human mind. And what does that mean? That means um, it's not just about what people want. Right now, it's like you're putting images in front of mouth-watered minds and they're consuming it. And there's this strange consumerist culture. But it's in some weird way, it's not strange. It's keeping us busy on a rock in the middle of nowhere. So it has its benefits, you know. But at the same time, we can implement a strategy which in some sense can be an advantage for the species. For me, it's like the moment I forget the human species is here, I am no longer living in an earth with others. I am in my own world. What does that mean? That means you have to keep your attention on what is important for you if you want it to remain. This global activity is a massive collective recognition that before we as human beings need precise, accurate symbols about reality, before an ideological relationship with the world, we have an emotional relationship with the world. That means when you see like an old villager person, let's say you're an atheist and you in some sense go see an old villager person that's a theist, you know, and that villager guy, the let's say the Bible or the Quran, that book is in some sense the only book they have access to. It's like their whole library. They're in such an outskirt remote village, and when you go talk to that guy, how do you speak to him? Imagine with the scientist or the atheist in some sense go and be like, hey man, you're delusioned. You think there's a God? Get out of here, man. You know, you're planting seeds of illusion in your head. He's saying this to the farmer, you know? And then the farmer's like, dude, chill. This is as much as I've seen. What do you want me to say? And so you see, it's on some level, every person is living a life through life, right? So that means, for example, when you speak to a senior citizen, you as a person must realize intensity echoes more, like things become more intense for you when you become weak, you know? So we have to consider the mind. It's the same for children. You know, I was on a subway and I'll tell you, I saw this father that was intoxicated and the kid's just sitting around on the chair and moving its legs like the kid is excited, and the intoxicated father grabs the wrist of his fist, the wrist of his son very intensely and says, listen to me, the guy's a bit drunk or something. He was on something, you know, on something hard. And it was for a second, he was talking to the kid, but he was talking to the kid without even knowing the kid was there. Do you see, like there can be, you see, more important than ideological truth is life sensitivity. It's life sensitivity. You got to realize there's a living being inside that objective view of a person. That means I got shocked and I'm like, Western culture has painted a picture of men, which is, it's let me tell you, it's kind of strange because in a system, let's say you're just like, I don't know, let's say you're a manager and they're like, all right, now instead of managing your company, you great manager, we want you to manage morality and identity politics in some sense. And this manager would be like, what do you mean manage identity politics? And the person would be, in some sense, find a way that human beings don't get obsessed with symbols that change in every generation of history, that human beings see the bigger picture. And I was thinking that the bigger picture really takes us to a philosophy that strays away from existential atheism. And the reason it strays away, because hope is an imposition. You have to set it in motion or nothing's going to happen. That's life. You either care enough to do something or you don't. And anytime you don't, you instantly see the feedback. So on some level, I was like, there's a feedback that, let's say, people outside of your inner, like people outside of you, in some sense, in front of your eyes, they care. They care for your blind spots and they want to share something good with you. You know, there is a level of humanhood that can only be accessed if the person doesn't want to be something all the time. When that feeling goes, I think it tends to be something the youthful mind holds, that it's running after something, but it doesn't realize it has to see the world first before it runs after it, right? And so that's the thing. It's this era where you're gonna see, like, if you just walk into any institution or school, especially in Canada, I'll tell you, you'll see that it's this artificial edifice, this artificial archetype to be good, but to be good in a system that overall is bad. So what I mean by that is that it's kind of strange. It's like on one level we're like, yeah, everybody's free. On another level we're like, wait a minute, but we're actually really different from each other. And so it's as if it's like the freedom is there, but it's not in the equal way. Do you know? That means it's like nowadays in Western civilization is like really ahead of certain third world countries, certain developing countries. I'm telling you, because certain developing companies, it is so common racism that in some sense they just think it's natural. It's like a weed that grew on the field. Do you know what I mean? It's like after some point you see it's just activity is happening. And a culture is how an activity has been observed and made into stories throughout time. I feel everybody alive now in 2020 contribute to the advanced communication of the mind of your civilization. What else can we do, really? What greater game is there to play other than advancing civilization? Can someone tell me? It's very obvious. It's as if, like, you know, without even seeing the instruction booklet, it's like you see the pieces of the IKEA furniture in front of you. You see these systems in humanity that can only update if a human being and a human attention enters it. That means some people may feel what I'm going to say is going to sound strange, but do you know, do you know how many only when we are willing to put down the savageness and the animalisticness of human behavior, put it down like an unnecessary weapon, heavy weapon we're holding, we will notice that there is an activity of life. And this activity of life, it's kind of like your heartbeat. You don't think about your heartbeat, it's happening. There's a level of its animateness. It's like, what do you think the Native American shamans in some sense considered? What do you think was speaking to the spirit of nature? What do you think that idea meant? That idea meant that nature had a voice, and having a voice is a suggestion of its own animate will. That means the reason a lot of people may be experiencing karmic turbulence is simply because you don't realize the world is alive, just like how your whole mind is alive in the moment. There is a life to the world. It doesn't mean it is objectively valid. That means it's like asking this question, if we think all our truths have to be meaningful three-dimensionally, what happens when we realize there's a fourth dimension? That's the issue with materialism. That's the issue for all those people who want to see it to believe it. What if there's other rooms behind the room we see ourselves in? So you in some sense disconnect yourself from the grandest mystery of them all. That in front of our eyes we are temporary, but what does that mean about behind our eyes? What do we know about the mind? What if the mind is eternal but not archetypally? what if the mind is energy? And they say energy can't be created or destroyed. Isn't that strange? But it transforms, and this Buddhist people are like, oh man, wheel of incarnation. You know, I was on some level being like, what is this? If I'm energy, how can I die? I'm just changing. If I am not energy, then what is being what? So you see, that's the thing. The simulation doesn't mean the simulation was. It doesn't mean you're in an illusion. It means the illusion is still being projected by the truth. That means the truth is inside. The illusion is inside the truth. It's simultaneously just the moment. The now is where it's all happening. Oh, didn't you know? So these global activities, I just want human beings. Imagine if they would look at a product, some product. Imagine you were like in a park somewhere, and somebody brought you like their new product, and they were like, "What do you think, man? How would you evolve this product?" Okay, and let's say you gave like, I don't know, next level ideas on it, you know, and then you would see it's kind of like now, instead of updating a product, we want to update our comprehension of a global process. And that's a time for global activity regenerating. Regeneration means it made an effort, but it hasn't gotten to the finish line. We have to regenerate. And that's going to be, we're right now, anybody who's alive in 2020, you're experiencing a moment in history where we are walking the bridge from experiencing language from the distance to becoming the worlds of our code. Right now, like, round of applause for everybody who's alive. Everyone who's alive in 2020, give yourself a round of applause, because you are witnessing how, in some sense, nature and technology are now the most important factor for human morality. Their infusion. That means we are like pre-cyberspace culture, and we are also experiencing the aftermath of the evolution of language. So we are like right now it's like the species is waking up that they're not just objects and they're not just subjects. That there is potentials, that we are all drops in an ocean behind our eyes. Who knows? There are many coin flips in this world. Right now, so many systems I see, I don't even understand their movement. Do you know some animals I've seen, like in nature, I'm like, why does this animal exist? You know, like like Richard Dawkins was making this point that there's certain this nerve system of a giraffe where the nerve line has to go from the brain down the neck of the whole giraffe just to make a loop. That means it's like, what's his name? Stephen? No, sorry, Richard Dawkins, not Stephen Hawking. Sorry, Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins was on this Lex Friedman kind of podcast, and it was very interesting. And he was saying, like, that's a design where nature wasn't efficient. You know, sometimes I wonder, what is this? That means, did we design not to want to see our whole bodies, but want to just look through it from one side? Why that strange design? Now, this doesn't mean nature is inefficient. It just means that if you can always find judgments from the third dimension about the two dimension. That means three-dimensional beings are laughing at two-dimensional beings. Four-dimensional beings are laughing at three-dimensional beings. Five-dimensional beings are laughing at four-dimensional beings. You know, six-dimensional beings are laughing at five-dimensional beings. Eventually, we see the unknown as projective in any sort of vision of reality. Welcome, guys, to the chat section. Feel free to write whatever you like on the wall of the chat section. Like, imagine it's a wall, you know. So I want that same effort in wondering about how to update that product now going towards people and philosophers emerging that are wondering how can behavior update. For me, imagine somebody has been around mathematical they have used mathematical language on a daily basis, and let's say someone doesn't have access to that mathematical language, but they've been in some sense going the poetic route. Let's say if we classify people in regards to their brain hemispheres, some people are seeking more they're going towards the new, and some people are in some sense, you can say, are trying to repeat the past in their own new way. You know, there's many ways of behavior, but I'm saying after some point, there is no meaning. There's no meaning to instantaneous being. That means when something is just being there, it's like, what can you say about it? It's just being there. You know? That means before language was created, all objects were silent phenomena. And then they in some sense gained a voice in our minds. So I could say the subject, like when I look at this cup of tea in front of me, this cup of tea, its voice is the subject. It has a subjective existence to me. I call it a cup. I call the liquid in it a tea. Do you see? So while there is going an objective life, there's simultaneously occurring a subjective life. Now that subjective life is pretty much us being conscious of potential energy before it becomes kinetic. That means really, I don't know, if people don't observe before they act, you're not using your mind right. That means it's like observance has its depth. Observance can be endless. That means ask someone, they come to this guy, and imagine this guy, his whole life he's studying geometry. They come and ask this guy, they're like, hey man, tell us about geometry. And the guy's like, no man, I can't. I don't know enough. And then the guy is doing next level research in geometry. And then they come and ask the guy, tell us something, man. And the guy's like, I don't know enough. And they keep coming up to the guy, and the guy's saying, I don't know enough. And then they tell the guy, when are you going to know enough? And then the guy realizes when he decides he knows, he has access to his experiential vision. So I want the human beings, any entrepreneurs out there, to not just set into motion new products, new services, but in some sense wonder about the evolution of human behavior. And whoever, right now the market is open, whoever finds the big win-win ideas, they become, I think, financially very valuable to civilization. That means win-win, or what are we doing on this rock in the middle of nowhere, Imagine being a person in this wallpaper. I don't know who the artist is, but kudos to him. He's an incredible illustrator, whoever it is. If somebody knows the name of the guy, please share it. But in this picture, we see that there is literally human beings just like us, but they're looking at a more advanced technology as if it's normal. So if in your mind you can envision something advanced, and then you can also envision how one day it will be normal, then you in some sense don't feel any judgment. Because in some sense the value of the new idea surpasses anything that was there before. For me, on some level, I feel the species is going to become so mindful of itself that it's not going to care about who said what and what. It's all a massive exploration. We're like this big hunter-gatherer tribe, and instead of hunting and gathering berries, now we're hunting and gathering inner perceptions and sharing it and trying to develop advanced systems from it. You got to see the advanced civilization behind your eyes, or you'll never see it in front of it. Because we have to build it. That means the value of you as a human being is what you engage from the landscape of your perception, and how clearly, before you engage anything from your perception, you can discriminate what is an outer phenomenological value and what is a subjective phenomenological value. That means when people speak to me, I don't have an opinion. I just watch as if, imagine a dragon appeared out of nowhere from the sky, and the dragon's like, yo, and you're like, whoa, is the dragon talking to me? And you realize it's one of those guys from Dragon's Den. No, I'm joking. Sorry guys, it's going past midnight, I'm feeling a bit. How can I tell you? So when you go towards what's important for you, you get energized. When you go away from what's important for you or don't have the endurance to see what it would be like, sometimes I try things just to see what it would be like. Who would I be if I did that? You know, that means if I never tried holding the pen in my hand, I wouldn't write. If I never wrote, I would never wonder about the true depths of my mind, where those words are coming from. So in some sense, reality requires us journaling our inner realms and sharing it with the outer realms. And hopefully in the future, if if fortune teleports to me, I want to start this massive archival school. I want to create this great library where the library is based on people's names and every human being is contributing to the massive collective exploration of the unconscious, the collective unconscious, which Carl Jung spoke about. The collective unconscious is pretty much the game of the soul. That means it's kind of like looking at this world and being like, wait a minute, I see an individual objective creature, like literally a creature, a being, an individual objective biological organism. Now, could it be that if this world was so strange enough to generate an individual objective conscious being, could there be a possibility that it has also projected a collective, unconscious, subjective field of being? That means there are organisms that are shaped, and there are organisms that are the fields of where those organisms arrive as shapes. So technically, we are living in our future mind. We're living in the mind of the future right now. If we are a simulation, it's from the future. That means right now, me and you could, in some sense, feel we're human beings right now, but we're actually like, I don't know, advanced beings in the Andromeda galaxy. We're like, yo, let's try out this simulation. You look at Sri Ramana Maharshi's writings and the works of even Alan Watts, and he was inspired, of course, Zen. And Sri Ramana Maharshi, he says, like, self-realization is the greatest, your own self-realization is the greatest service you can render onto the world. And people would be like, Ramana Maharshi, what do you mean? What about civilization, advancing it and all this? And he's like, no, your own self-realization. And the reason he's saying that is because there is a huge chance that in the yogic thought that you're in a simulation. That as if it's like you were reality had a solipsist secret to it, secret element to it. But there is also the chance that no. So I feel we have to study our attention while it's in the body, and that makes sense. So when we want to study attention in the body, we're like, okay, now that we've established we're a creature of attention before a creature of thoughts, because thoughts come and go, really the conscious waking state is attention is present. And in deep sleep, attention isn't present. And in dream states, attention is present, but it's present as the mind generating the world. And what is the mind? The mind is what the body is evolving to. Our body is trying to be like the mind, and the mind, if it chooses, it can choose to be the body. Your mind is like a fourth dimensional being, like a fifth dimensional being, like a fourth, let's say a three-dimensional being, and your body is like a two-dimensional being, and they're both in the same room communicating. So the body has its limitations, but the mind has its limitlessness. That means the scientist that entertains the idea of infinity literally in his inner realms has recognized the value of the limitless. That means its value cannot be measured. That means if my voice, if YouTube gives you the option, you can increase the speed. if you really increase my voice to such a fast speed, you cannot comprehend it. So it's like this obvious law that as something speeds up, it becomes less comprehensible. And when we go look at all these motivation people in the self-help industry, it's like, who knew barbells were so inspiring? For me, it's true, work hard, and you have to on some point. And it's fun to even work hard. But what I'm saying, what's the thing is that work smart before you work hard. That means care for your vision before you care for the appearance of the vision. That means, do you know how many ideas I had to just trust? What I mean by trust, that means, all right, I'm living in an environment that entertains this viewpoint of the world. All right, let's walk in the room of this viewpoint as a being. So for me, it's like those people you go and see, like those people engaged with very physical activities, they don't care about ideas because ideas are less real to them than physical movement, for example. It doesn't mean they don't have great ideas. It just means that they are more engaged, that the result is an external activity. That means it's like the difference between the philosopher writing and the philosopher pondering. When a philosopher ponders, it's like self-realization. When a philosopher writes, it's collective awareness. That means the philosopher is not acknowledging he's alone in the universe. Pretty much philosophers are writing down their philosophies in history, guys, and they're putting it in these glass bottles as their lived life. And in some sense, they're sending their philosophies into the ocean of history. And so philosophers in the future can go and totally be like, oh my God, Rene Descartes looked at life as if it's a mind-body dualism. The mind is its own dimension, the body is its own dimension, as if you found what that philosopher lived for, to say. So anyways, we have to concentrate as a species through the recognition that ultimately everybody is freaking out in their subconscious mind. And you'd be like, what do you mean, Mr. Within? And I'll be like, yo, man, it's empty. And what I mean by that is we're on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and some philosophers have said, where is up? Where is down when there is a rock in the middle of a vacuum? A sphere in a vacuum, where is up and down? Or if two spheres spin around each other, which sphere is spinning around which? So in some sense, of course, you got to realize I'm more of continental philosopher rather than an analytical philosopher, even though I attempt to analyze many things. But I'm saying like the reason is because language holds within it an unknown glow for me. For me, before metaphysics, any person who communicates to me, for me, it's like their mind is very obvious through their speech. Because you see what images, you see where the person's attention is. That means when a person speaks, it's like they are sharing. They're sharing how their eyes are open to the world. But the eyes of the world are many. As global activities regenerate, we will begin to acknowledge ourselves before being just bodies. We realize now we have come to the station of evolution where we are minds. And now the mind can be used. That means back in the day, people didn't have much reason to use their minds. Back in the day, if you were just strong, you would win everything. It doesn't matter. Even if you argued with a king and you were stronger than the king, you could have just killed the king on the spot and claimed yourself as king. Like people did that back in the day. So what I'm saying is strength was the test. Now is the strength of our inner realms that's being tested. That is being the grand challenge. That means you got to look at people on the street and it's not just see them as objects walking around. You got to see them as each has a sphere of their reality. This is why, on some level, if the person is comfortable, then you make the joke. If the person is not comfortable, you make the joke. The person is like, what the So it's kind of like before you answer a question, you ask the person, do you even care to listen to it? And if the person says yes, then you answer the question. Or how do you care to listen to it? Because our eyes open from many moments. And to be honest, I haven't still read. It's on my book list. To be honest, I don't have a list. It's just certain books I felt I just need to read. It's Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning. where hopefully in the future, if possible, I'll probably study that as a hobby and kind of see how this man has his eyes open, because it seems to be a very complex literary work. That means, like, people don't realize Jordan Peterson has written a book that if there was a museum for like the complexity of books, his book would be in it. You know, this maps of meaning. And so when I first heard the title, that's the incredible thing about a title. You know how many people are looking at the title of this talk and seeing a different meaning to it? So when he said maps of meaning, I was like, maybe this man has seen a landscape and he's wondering about how the maps of meaning are how literally the eyes of people are open in the world. Or what is the way to find meaning, maybe. I don't know. I haven't read the book, but hopefully one day, um, after I've studied it, I do want to give a review on it if Jordan Peterson's fine with it, or whatever. I don't know, guys. I don't know. I don't know even if tomorrow, it's sometimes strange when you sleep. You're like, okay, I trust things so simply, but who knows if the person's gonna wake up? So reality is very. I'm just like pretty much every day, just feeling as if I'm just walking into a new part of the forest. And that excitement makes me care, because really there is a sort of strange fear in the wrong archetypal definitioning. What that means is we are right now, for example, of course, I'm just one guy talking, so this is just one person's view in a universe of a billion trillion stars, okay? So nobody freak out when I'm saying it. I'm just saying something as a person. But I'm saying that I wondered about how human beings, as their consciousness or the scope of their vision advances, how does that have a toll on how they identify with their environment? Because it's 2 points of evolution. I mean, it's like after you accept evolution, then you're like, okay, how are we evolving now? And so it's pretty much different people looking at the same phenomena and interpreting it in different manner, you know? And by the way, guys, you're welcome to ask any question. Like, this is strangely interactive, so um, because it's a live story. When I think about it, I'm like, my ancestors couldn't do this, so that's why I tried it out. So pretty much, guys, that global activity regeneration means, as a global community, we realize that we can consciously reinterpret the same activity. And really, when you go look at what entertainment has become, it's just dimensional, it's stargates. That's it. Technology is a stargate. I playfully asked myself, okay, if I was to look for a stargate, where would I find one? And I realized there was two on my face. That's the gate where starlight enters. Guys, I gotta share something. Alan Watts, Terence McKenna, these two people, when I heard how they were speaking, literally, you don't believe, but voices grow through each other. That means it's like, for me, Alan Watts and Terence McKenna, it's like I never regret knowing about them, you know? So I cared. I remember I uploaded some of the content from Alan Watts, so I was like, oh my god, one day maybe these videos may not be found. So I was just uploading it, you know. Anyways, guys, I'm gonna get back to what I was talking about. Oh, Paige, find me now. Sorry, guys, I have this a sense of equal attitude towards the page, where I don't judge the pages of the notebook. I just open a random page and I write it. Oh gosh, I can't. All right, guys, whatever. What could be an example of a regeneration of a global activity? So a global activity means literally if there were 8 billion beings, their attention had to be on some similar event. So our effort to revolutionize behavior on our planet should be in creating interactive events. Now, usually we are introduced from nature towards technology, as if we're like, yo, we were natural beings and now we created our own technological universe, you know. But I think the way we have to regenerate the global activity is say people right now. It's strange. They are shy. I don't want to say shy. People value communication through avatars more than through their own being. We create technological fashioned events. We have to accept cyberspace culture rather than try to escape it or fight it, but we have to navigate through it. And what that means is, I think in the next probably 30 years, people are going to become less wanting to speak to each other. It would become a world of minds, I think, you know? So right now it's strange. Even this event with 2020, like the Black Plague of the modern generations, the coronavirus and whatnot. For history's sakes, I'm just sharing it here. What does that mean? That means the human being has been pushed back from outside the realm. And it's like the strange aftermath of being insensitive to the environment, that if the environment is alive, it will retaliate. That means you can't walk on a lion's tail and not expect to hear a roar soon, you know. So as we accept cyberspace culture, we attempt to make cyberspace culture the superior secular morality. And the superior secular morality is trying to find a way to look at life as the evolution of matter to what matter has done to itself. So I feel Western civilization, its spirituality, it doesn't. It's like if it's like it doesn't. It's going to resurface in an archaic revival kind of way through cyberspace culture. That means cyberspace culture is the Western Enlightenment's fruit. Okay, but the Eastern Enlightenment's fruit is not per se cyberspace culture. It is like just like we have cyberspace, imagine nature space culture. And so what that means is like we have to preserve the past because if we lose sight of it, we can get too easily we can be too oblivious to what we are as the future and sets in. So I feel that people right now should attempt at aesthetics. Right now, I think the two biggest things that need human beings, advanced communicators all around the world need to contribute to is the evolution of aesthetics, literally how things look. Like our cities, excuse my language, but they look like a bunch of cubes. Like it's like civilization, the Medici family, even though their motives were questionable, they were wealthy bankers, but they at least understood that if civilization was an awesome place, people would be civilized. People would love to be civilized, right? So in some sense, they invested a lot in making the city beautiful, making the sidewalks way bigger, making reality a space where people were honored by its advancement, not dishonored by, we're cruel to our own nature. For me, the downtown of countries are where the defeated and the successful walk in the same streets. What does that mean? We all are having a human experience, but in different quality, different texture. So imagine this massive movement occurs on this earth where we're like, wait a minute, let's instead of identifying ourselves with, for example, what we physically are, let's just see ourselves as if we are tourists on earth. What does that mean? That means we are travelers, therefore we advance as a civilization by changing our attention from thinking of ourselves as just like a character in a story and realizing the character and the story are the simultaneous vastness of the process of the cosmic activity. So for me, it's as if like after human beings have become aware of each other, it's like, okay, it's like first we became aware of like the mineral kingdom. We're like, all right, we see this rock. And then we became of like, let's say plant kingdom. We saw the plants. And then we saw the animal kingdom. We became aware there's creatures. Then we became aware of our own kingdom, the human kingdom, and we saw each other, we had the reality of that. Now imagine after how many eons would we be just living as good, lovely human beings, only to realize it's all going to change. And the nature of the universe is strangely entropic. What does that mean? That means it's always changing. What's strange is how you think you're the same person as yesterday. And I'm telling you, that's because that's a three-dimensional acknowledgement of a two-dimensional problem. Who knows where the world will take us? Mr. Within's vision is Civilization 2.0. Civilization 2.0 is an attempt for human beings to go through certain great transformations or neo-transformations. And these neo-transformations, in some sense, will... In 600 years, imagine you're walking your dog in the park. You're walking your dog in the park and you're like, wait a minute, why is the skyscraper getting taller? And then you see the effort of Mr. Within Civilization 2.0. And what I mean by that is it is an effort that it will be in 600 years, if these great transformations I speak of happen, I feel we're going to have all human infrastructure on Earth be lifted into the sky We will live in sky cities and master them to evolve them into some interstellar spaceships. That means we're pretty much trying to make our whole city and civilization a spaceship for safety reasons. So in 600 years, you suddenly see all human infrastructure lift into the sky. And then what do we see? Civilization 2.0 is an attempt that for 2,000 years, imagine Earth is like a house party, and we're like, these house party are destroying the house as they're partying in it. They're like, yeah, man, I'm in this life once, and they don't care what they're stepping on. They don't care what's being destroyed. They just want to devour and feel good. But it's not good at all when you really look at it. And so the attempt is like, as if imagine the house party owner is like, yo, this is chaos. We gotta do something. And the house owner calls his friend, and his friend's like, I got a plan. And that plan is Civilization 2.0, guys. That all the people who are destroying the house inside the house party, we set up tents and a different kind of, like we take the party outside, then we in some sense start cleaning the house, and then the people are partying in the tents, on the lawn, and even though we can say the lawn is getting polluted, but when the house is ready, they can go back and party in the house, or the people would be so intelligent at that point where they would actually go party at a club. They wouldn't even be at the house. They wouldn't destroy their own house for the sake of joy. But I don't know. Sometimes maybe it's better. Sometimes you gotta care for adventure or life will remain the same. So, Civilization 2.0, this ideology that I've kind of developed, it in some sense, it was something I was going to speak about. It was an intention prior to giving the talk to talk about it. And Civilization 2.0 has three phases. And so, Mr. Within would say phase one, design, build sky cities, build and design sky cities. Phase two is called the heavenized earth. It's called Earth Heavena. I decided to give it a name. Earth Heavena is phase two, and I've shared this in other talks. You can search Civilization 2.0 and you'll find me talking about it in other talks. But the idea is that phase two is the heavenized earth, and so while people are partying in the lawn, we start cleaning the rooming. Do you know what I mean? So heavenized earth would be the attempt that intentionally we're living in our skies for 2,000 years so that we can make the earth suddenly into like an uninhabited paradise, like a newfound planet. And while we do this, phase three sets into motion. Phase three is that, so imagine phase one, we got the sky cities in the air. Phase one would be a constant relationship of human beings and botanists, the grandchildren of botanists in some sense. Excuse me. We are alive once. You cannot avoid the performance of a lifetime, really. When you're in the conscious waking state, your mind is dancing upon the world. Mr. Within is simply asking, when will there be the ushering in of the behavior for an advanced civilization? When? What are we waiting for? Who are we waiting for? What can we wait for? We are our own eyes. We are the movers of it. So, guys, John asks a very interesting question in the chat section. Welcome, everyone. John says, hey, Mr. Within, I was just listening to Watts and he was speaking on consciousness flow. Do you think our consciousness flows in and out of each other's minds like co-creation, like the river of Tao? I don't just think that. I think that consciousness, when it goes beyond the language threshold, is an inconceivable, unknown rhythm. I am saying the most advanced that a human being, state a human being can be on this planet doesn't have image. And you would be like, Mr. Within, then what can you say about it? And I'll be like, that's why I created the word, the language threshold. So I will tell you that you can give any shape. You can give any shape authority in your vision. You can give any voice authority in your vision, but why was your voice here? Why was your mind here? Why are you alive as your eyes right now? These questions make the roar of the human soul. That we are moving into modern times, and now we must act in ways where our ancestors will not be honored by us listening to them. Our ancestors will be honored that we fascinate them. That I was like, there's no point of making your ancestors proud, because then you gotta go look at all your ancestors. You have to do something in this life where you see it is the effort of all efforts, and your mind can see it. And I'm telling you guys, you won't believe it. Master patience, ultimate patience, the ultimate presence of energy. If you can just be, then the doer is also its nature of being. Your eyes are the secrets of starlight. They are the memories of starlight, sculpted on the surface of this earth. So, John, I would say that on some level, yes, I think it's an attributeless presence of a field where our knowing is not linear. We can only from the bottom of the mountain, when we look at the peak, oh man, it's like it doesn't make sense logically. But when we look from the top of the mountain at the bottom, you're like, yo, bro, just put effort and you'll find a way up the mountain, you know. You know, it's how much we care for our breath while it's in our lungs. It's how much we care for our vision while it's in our eyes. It's how much we care for what can be. That was the thing, guys. Like, don't think I'm, even though I speak, I tend to keep these talks with a sort of, give them through a certain wave of discretion. But there are moments where if you hear my voice on paper, it is way chaotic. I have read my own writing sometimes, and it's like, it is so much more how can I tell you, like, your mind, you can only hear its voice, the voice of the Logos. In ancient Greek, Heraclitus pretty much came up with the idea of the Logos. And the Logos was this notion of this inner guiding voice within all beings. So if you were an ancient Greek, John, if you were asked that question from an ancient Greek person, he'd be like, you are the Logos. You are the Logos' extension into this dimension. So I am telling you, again, it's the debate between individual consciousness and collective consciousness and what that would realistically look like. Philosophers should go debate about this, and crowds will swarm towards them. Because I'm telling you, for me, it took me a while to get it. And when I got it, I realized the value was not to jump and grab something. That means it's like when you enter a room, don't just randomly jump and grab something. So when you hear something, like Aristotle would say even, it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it. So that moment when you're entertaining a thought, what are you? You are potential. The birds fly in a sky that is boundless to them. Why cannot man? Why cannot the human being look at this world and be like, I want to move in it? You must give yourself inner freedom, because even if you find outer freedom, you will not know it's freedom until the inner realms are free. And how you free your inner realms is pretty much in an instant realizing you don't know and honoring the unknown. So many people honor the known. I don't know how many people honor the unknown. I think most people, they just run away from the unknown. They're like, yo man, this is, it's too dark in this side of the forest. They run away, you know? Any ideology that doesn't innately point to advancement is an idea that has passed. The mystery of the eyes of man is a free-for-all. Who knows? We each have a different DNA, do you know? The Tao is there, guys. The Tao is like how your mind is alive in ways where the body, like the body again, let's entertain the notion it's like two-dimensional intelligence, and the mind is three-dimensional. So we're kind of like, yo man, why can't we see the mind? Because two-dimensionally, the mind is the body. The two-dimensional evaluation of the mind, let's say playfully, is the body, and the three-dimensional evaluation of the mind, that it is in some sense in a dimension where the body can never know. Like it's as if like your shadow wondering what you look like. You'll realize it never knows because it is the shadow. So a lot of creatures in this universal sector will eventually come towards the contentment of the collective spheres of humanity, that the planets are alive and their voice echoes throughout various civilizations in space and time, rise and crumble. And so what it means is that your human species is an effort, is an advancement. It is the dawn. You see, you have made the real the illusion. So you have nowhere else to go to other than yourself as the truth. Because in front of your eyes, if there is not trust, then you don't understand the vehicle you're in. O human being, master the elemental realms, master the realms of the subjective, master the observance of them beyond, and join the galactic. Because the galactic vision is the vision that imagine you were an anthropologist and you were going through, guys, imagine you were like an extraterrestrial anthropologist, okay, from like some other place. And you were like, okay, let me go study different primitive civilizations. And let's say Earth was like the 10th civilization you had come to. And if you were studying Earth as an extraterrestrial anthropologist, you would be like, okay, what is primitive about them? They don't realize there's other civilizations out there. They don't realize they can have an interdimensional relationship with their own conception of time. They don't realize that their eyes cannot be measured by the two-dimensional limits of the... No, I don't want to say two-dimensional, but like the body cannot speak the language of the mind, but it is the expression of it. Yeah, John, guys, John says something interesting. He says, cool. Lately, I've noticed people around me understand my point of view without talking about it. Seems like we're starting a new way of communication. I think what it is it's natural. I've called it in one viewpoint, one angle, I've called it an evolutionary return to nature. In another angle, I've called it the era of advanced communication, and in some sense the gravitation towards the multidimensional renaissance. I feel that human beings have to treat cyberspace culture like thought, because it is strangely the externalization of human thought that becomes cyberspace culture. That means when you're engaged in an activity, you don't really feel like a body. You know, you feel like a moment, like the whole moment is happening. That motorcyclist who was doing a backflip in the air in front of a stadium, that guy, if you asked him who are you in that moment, even though he probably can't speak, but in his inner realms, he would just be the whole moment, as if what was happening in physical reality was more exciting than what the imagination could, in some sense, treasure. Let me tell you this, guys. just have this attitude with people and see what happens to your life. Don't judge them. Don't act like you have their eyes, and just watch them as unknown potential, and just listen to how their mind speaks. Guys, you don't know it. I think this is probably true in advanced negotiation, but the tone of the negotiator, let's say in like a UN kind of contract kind of situation, the negotiator, like if you study the human mind, it may be such a simple, fragile jar of jelly, but but it's like at the same time it has this potential for all this complex behavior. And so we have to build a civilization where we feel as creatures, tourists in manifestation, the experience and the quality. So hopefully in the future I can give a TED talk on this. But I'm saying there's this whole kind of, there's so much unused space where genius can be birthed out through just attempt towards something the new. That means just be a person that cares for, like when you see a person walking in the street, you know how many of their ancestors lived and died to just be able to pass on that human being's design? That means the value of humanity is ancient, is it not? Even scientists tell us we're made of stardust. So stardust has this ancient value. That means, like this pen in my hand, its atoms are priceless. They're stardust. Like this pen I'm holding, atomically, it's like. Do you see what I mean? So. Anyways, phase 3 would be the attempt that it's we would be. I've spoken about how civilization 2.0 is a yin yang civilization. But I'm not going to get into that too much in this talk. I'm just going to say that phase 3 is going to be a self-awareness attempt, and Mr.Within says the civilization has 2 decisions, but I give my own recommendation. The civilization can abandon the idea of sky cities and go live on Earth and no longer look at things from the sky. That means maybe some people in the sky city become homesick. So after 2,000 years, phase 3, I said 3,600 years from now. So right now it's 2020. So, wait, is that right? What was it? Oh, sorry guys, just saying back. 600 years, phase 1 occurs. 2,000 years goes by. So 2,600 years. And then there was 1,000 years for phase 3. So 2,600 years would be when phase 3 is starting. Phase would be the ignition of phase 3. And so in 2,600 years, pretty much if this vision of Mr.Within echoes in history, or I don't know, if we care for this idea, I think nature cares for it. But the civilization has an opportunity that at that point we would say the children of the world will be classified as those who are the children of the earth and those who are the children of the sky. From the sky cities, certain people can choose to go towards phase 4 and the interstellar advancement of civilization. Pretty much we're going to send phase 4 would be this massive technological revolution, but on a galactic scale. So imagine we have lived in our skies, the earth has been restored, and now we're wondering what to do. And now from those sky cities, we can either return to Earth, or we can in some sense keep Earth. This is Mr. Within's recommendation, to keep Earth as plan B, and in some sense start working on AI. And pretty much there's going to be, I've written it as an advancement beyond the language threshold. That means it's going to have 2 crossroads. We're going to reach the peak and the epitome of the evolution of cyberspace culture, the life of the mind of the being, and then we're going to reach the ultimate evolution of our technologies, where phase 4, again, I'm going to repeat it again, AI is just pretty much going ahead, building civilizations for us, the space for civilizations, and us entering those civilizations. That means mankind has to it has to realize, like there was this great negotiator, he gave this advice, and he's like, at the beginning of the negotiation, there doesn't need to be mutual trust. It doesn't mean you should trust every person you communicate to. It just means there should be mutual respect. And now Mr. Within is saying that mutual respect should be with the eyes towards an advanced civilization. We want to see how far our eyes can echo in history. Let us not be afraid of the only roar which is our life purpose as a civilization. You know? That means we're not going to be afraid that man moved his eyes in civilization. So overpopulation, if it was me, I would tell people that it's like overpopulation is not the problem. The problem is that we're all choosing to exist in two-dimensional space, in two-dimensional planes. If we lived in sky cities, you know how many different kinds of sky cities you can have in the sky? You can have endless sky cities in the sky. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the, ultimate. But what I mean is that three-dimensionally there's so much space. So overpopulation is not a problem. Our technology is not creating sky cities is the problem. So if you're a billionaire listening to me, go try to build sky cities, And the soul of the world will honor you. But 600 years, guys, that's a while. That means like I don't know if I would be a concept anymore by then. But anyways, like we live as the moment is alive. So anyways, guys, I think people who are drawn to this, let me tell you, I don't have an opinion too much on who listens to these talks really, because they say the moment the artist gives his artwork out, it's no longer his artwork. Every person's eyes is a new dimension of the artwork's meaning. That means the artwork branches out interdimensionally on the subjective plane through other people's eyes. So it's like, imagine if like 12 people are hearing this sentence, there's literally in 12 moments around the world, there's 12 echoes of this, like your brain is giving off 12, you're as what you hear, you echo back. I don't want to say echo back, it's like the reflection of sound, okay? And it's interesting, we speak about sound waves, not sound particles. So you see, it's man's choice what is particulate to him. I'm going to tell you guys a story that happened. We must not fear what is beyond the clouds, and we must not fear what is beyond the clouds. We must open our eyes and realize that is the value of life. That even if you might be a person right now in the world where you're like, I don't know if there's meaning to this. But I'm telling you, it's as if it doesn't mean life is meaningless. It means that we advance on in the most efficient vision, in the most efficient way, so that we live for those who will find the meaning. And that's the thing. I am not sitting here feeling I have answers. I am sitting here watching something and I'm just commenting on it. And I'm watching a civilization which has to see its what-if potential. That means, imagine they ask someone, can you do this? And the person's like, no, I can't. I've never been a person to be able to speak or do this, And then suddenly you say the person, try it. And the person's like, no, I can't, I'm not that. And the person's like, just try it. And the person tries it and they suddenly imagine it's singing and the person suddenly realizes they're an incredible singer or something. Do you see what I mean? There has to be trust and then a co-creative symbiosis of the experience of man in world and world in man. And then there comes the emergence of the new archetypal vision. So I feel we are living in different states of mind. So as I'm like just like let's say a human being wakes up in the morning, and the person walks, or I'll speak for myself. Like when I wake up in the morning and I go and I live the day, when I live the day, every movement, every step, every moment, there is like an awareness to the environment. There's an awareness to the self. Then there's an awareness to the relationship of this self to the environment. Then there's the awareness to what I must put in the moment is the new effort. And so when you no longer fear novelty, or novelty becomes your best friend, that is when you kind of laugh. You kind of laugh because you are right now the past life of your future self. You realize the mind has an access to infinite speed, which means an evolution beyond the conceivable. So we have to prepare ourselves for an apocalypse in the educational system. And you're going to be like, what do you mean? And Mr. Within is going to be like, guys, we discovered language. We started connecting symbols, subjects to objects. When you realize that, you automatically find yourself in the mighty highlands and the skies of the continental philosophers. You know, guys, I'll share another story. When I was in high school, there was this, strangely, there was this girl that I was so drawn to. And in my mind, I was seeing this girl in such a magnificent way that every time she would come near me, I would get overwhelmed. I would get overwhelmed by how I had seen my relationship with her without even knowing her. And so, how can I tell you, sometimes your tennis racket falls out of your hand, you know? And so it becomes a situation. It was like, I'm just telling you, I had a relationship with the world. And then later on, I realized that girl was incredibly twisted, you know? And so I realized I had strangely my shyness had protected me from that. But there was something there where the relationship I had in my inner realms was causing an unnatural reaction in myself in that moment without me realizing the value. And I realized if you don't know your value in the moment, you can't feel comfortable existing. So what I'm telling you, the mind plays games sometimes. So it doesn't mean like it's kind of I was in love with the image with the meaning I had given to her image in some sense. And of course I realized this world is a destiny. Like how can I tell you, the inner realms are different, and that's the wonder. That we kind of create a win-win situation. We build an advanced civilization that it's not just the bodies of people advancing, but the minds. Now, in today's modern culture, if you ask how do you advance the minds of people, well, you're like, what are their minds looking for? And you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you realize people just want to endure through this. They just want to get through life. Okay, so in some sense, on some level, it's this. We are like our minds are way more advanced as animals, but we're still living in the bodies of an animal. Do you know? Just ask yourself if there was efficiency, what would it look like? What would it feel like? What would it be like if there was? I am saying this, guys. I think it's perfect. This is a healthy exercise, an inner exercise that Mr. Within recommends. Find one day where you're comfortable and you feel good. One day where you're like, all right, it's a nice day, and go sit somewhere where you are either in the presence of nature or you are in nature. You know, it doesn't matter if you're sitting on a balcony and looking at things. It doesn't matter if you are actually in a forest sitting. I don't know. Do you know? Imagine your most chaotic self. Imagine what your worst will look like. Your worst self, your chaotic self. And imagine then what your greatest, your most ordered self will look like. Now imagine these two selves standing in front of you, and you're standing and looking at them, and they are looking at you. And now begin to see that the chaotic self looks at the ordered self, and the ordered self look at the chaotic self. They're looking at each other. Chaos and order are codependent. And then the chaotic self and the ordered self, they both look at you. As if the chaos understood itself and the order understood itself, but they were like, what's this other? And then you realize you are the witness beyond your chaos and order. The wings of freedom, where one of them was chaos, one of them was order. You know, for humanity's last stance against any sort of giant problem is really, we see more and we live more. Care for the living, honor the living, defend the living. And the world soul will be like, oh my God, a human being is cared. And when I say the world soul is the health of the future generations. Live for that world soul. Do not avoid the future because the past doesn't want to change. I was like, all right, if people don't want to change, what do? We just add a new dimension. I was like, all right, Civilization 1.0, do your thing, but let Civilization 2.0 also happen. Yeah. So anyways, guys, I'm going to end the talk here. One last comment before I open it up to Q&A. And I gotta say a few things about neurotransformations. I'm gonna try one more time to find this page where I wrote something about it. Hopefully the page finds me. There we go, I found the page. So I wrote about neurotransformations. The transformation allows a new access to the whole design. So a neurotransformation is when your concentration or single pointedness of mind has been on something where you're seeing the whole system differently. Some people thought the point of meditation was not to have thoughts. Oh, how foolish those gurus were. You know, and of course you're not a guru, you know, because in some sense you are, it's as if like there was never an outer guru. Do you know this? The outer guru's teaching was like, bro, there's not an outer guru. You're your own eyes. What do you want me to say? And when you realize, when you study the self and the self fades and suddenly you awaken to the nature of how in some sense reality is not just your projection, but the body is the projection of the world. Same way we're like, oh my God, this world is Gaia. That we give the personality of the Gaian mind. In the same way, we can see the reversion back into the void. So silence is like no inner realms exist, but the moment the person speaks about them, the inner realms have been given a momentum in regards to the outer realm. I feel that the Chinese mentality that the universe is an organism and we're part of this organism and therefore there's no literally symbol to it and it's the Tao of just how nature is alive at once. I feel it's not about, it's building an airport for minds. Civilization 2.0 is saying really the destination is up to how far the eyes go. You know, you right now might be a person seeing something that nobody else is, and whose responsibility is it for you to come running to your civilization being like, yo guys, discoveries from the inner realms. You know, the Discovery Channel doesn't contain what happens behind the eyes. That must be communicated. Do you know that means if human beings had a writing assignment, it would be timeless. That means writing is like, I can't tell you, Start writing your mind on paper, and you will see that thought is not a particle in space. It is a process of how the unknown is moving the known. And that is what really flow means. But it can get, in a Vedic context, more complex than that. That means life is not just, all right, I saw the emptiness, what now? There is the vision of self-fulfillment and self-actualization in the sense that you engage. So it's like it doesn't make sense being in a wonderland and not going on the roller coaster ride. And the roller coaster ride is that you are creating it. Your attention is piloting your planes of existence. And so a time for global activity regeneration. We need to start living as observant minds, mindfulness, as the Zen sages would say. Mindfulness means don't bang the door shut. Study your mind. Try to wonder what is the innovation that the world is waiting for that your DNA can bestow. Because you see, really, it's like on some level, it's like looking at a samurai and being like, bro, I know you had honor, but like, we're in a universe where we created the meaning, so really, you are creating your honor. And the samurai would be like, I have too much honor to listen to what you're saying about honor. But it would be a situation is that we're living in our own values, and as far as the eyes can advance, the meaning can evolve. And so the neo-transformations are the great transformations that will lead humanity towards civilization 2.0. And I remember I wanted to share this personal experience. Anyways, I was in this park, and I had this habit. This is years ago. The story is, I'm telling you, is probably from 2000. Literally, I think it was 2012, or it could have been, yeah, it was 2012, 13, somewhere around there. I found myself in this giant park in Toronto. I don't remember the name of the park. And so it was in the middle of the day, sunny day, birds there, good weather, everything's very nice. And I'm just sitting on a bench and I'm writing. And then in some sense, I decided to go for a walk. You know, and as I was walking, I'm walking by the space and I realized, oh my God, there's a graveyard. Like the park is literally connected to a graveyard. And so I was just walking and I remember seeing a squirrel. And there was this squirrel that the moment I walked, it was as if this squirrel was frozen in time. And this squirrel was just staring. And it was staring exactly the angle where I was standing. So I was standing still and I was having this stare down. When you live in Canada, you have a lot of stare downs with like animals. You know, I've had stare downs with deer even. So I'm saying like, that was the thing. That squirrel was like frozen in time and I was staring at it. And then automatically, no thought in my mind, I just get this emotion and I just point to the sky. And I remember these words find me as throughout the years after that incident, where it was like, rise, mankind, rise. Like these three words, I can't tell you how many times these words have knocked on my shoulder. Rise, mankind, exclamation point, rise, exclamation point. Like, and for a long time I was like, why is this like, how far can man rise? And then when the idea of civilization 2.0 came into my vision, I was like, oh, this is it. That this rise mankind, I'm telling you guys, it's like, I think I'm kind of born to talk about civilization 2.0, you know? It's like echoing, it's like it's making sense of everything I've experienced. And it's, of course, it's just a way of attention, but I'm saying, if we don't care for an advanced civilization, we'll never see what it would look like. And so if we want to live in an advanced civilization, that means we need to have an advanced observation of civilization. So in some sense, honor the expression of people, because it takes energy, literally. Like, it's like when a person speaks, it's like, of course, there's energy. I try to use a rhythm of excitement to, you know how they say, like, when the guy's having fun, You know, it's like there's no time. I mean, they don't say it like that. They say time flies when you're having fun. So for me, I'm like, okay, that means if I fly, my energy will not be orchestrated based on my feeling of time. So when I speak, I often go into the rhythm of my inner realms. And the rhythm of the inner realm sometimes is antenna-like. Sometimes I'm just somewhere and suddenly this very insightful idea design geometrically appears. For me, if I was to judge all thought, Mr. Within would judge it geometrically. So that means I don't necessarily see duality to it. For me, it's like, again, I spoke about it in an earlier talk, the axis of the unknown and the known, and also the axis of the simple and the complex. So what does that mean? That means the simple, we can look at the unknown in a simple way. We can look at what we know in a simple way. And then we can also look at the unknown in a complex way. And we can also look at the known in a complex way. Okay? And we have this option where the unknown can look at the simple, or the unknown could look at the complex, and then we have this option of whether the known can look at itself in a simple way or look at itself in a complex way. And then there's also the awareness of the relationship of the simple with the complex, and the simple with the complex with the unknown and the known, and the pattern just endlessly echoes. You know? So what it means is that it's literally like chess. They say, let me read you this fact. This fact, people who play chess are going to be like, yo, Mr. Within, you keeping chess alive, man. How many moves can you do? That's what I'm Googling, guys. How many moves can you do in a chess game? This is a probability statistic. So it says there is a recent. No, sorry. Let me see this. Okay, check this out, guys. Check this out. They say, oh my god. Oh my god. There's an ad. I can't access the site. Okay, check this out. The first four moves of chess alone, for the first four moves of chess alone, there are 318, what is this? Quadrillion, 979,564,000,000,000 moves. There is literally 319 trillion moves you can do after the first for the first four moves of chess alone. Now check this out, guys. There are that many different combinations for the first four moves of chess alone. Then it says for the first 10 moves, this increases to a number which I will just copy paste for you in the chat section. Or check this out. This is how many chess moves that are possible. Check this out, guys. For the first 10 moves of a chess game. 169 octillion chess moves. That means even like an octopus would be like, what the fuck? So I'm saying, guys, that's how many combinations there are. So for the first four chess moves, for this grid of simplicity, for the axis of simplicity and complexity and the known and the unknown, technically I could use the same statistic and say there are 300 There are that many possible ways. I should write this down. So guys, there's that many ways that characters and personalities can exist. This number that I'm gonna paste right now. There's that many ways. Mr. Within is saying there's that many ways where human realities exist. I would say that's the number of realities that exist in a simple model. That's how many potential ways personalities can look at the world. Guys, this talk. I'm proud of this talk. So anyways, guys, that's the end of the talk. Thanks for listening. And I'll open it up to Q&A so anybody can engage the chat section, and I'll pretty much share my honest view on whatever you want me to, comment on. Yeah, based on how you enter the room, you get a certain result of it in your mind. But there's also endless ways to approach that same infinite combination. So that means even before, like the way how can I tell you, the human mind is its own architect. Like Matrix, they should have written it in the script, but in Matrix, when he sees the architect in that movie scene, he should be like, "Wait a minute, man, are you the architect of my mind right now?" So, anyways, guys, that's the talk so far. All right, guys, I feel then bless the great contentment that ushers in an advanced civilization. It's kind of good. I think that I remember one of a profound moment in my life. I asked someone a question, and they said, this friend of mine, she said, the answer comes from within. And that was such an empowering statement, that behind my eyes, the unknown is being made known by the very effort of living. That right now, you are not just a human activity on this earth. You are a cosmic. The earth is a cosmic expression. You see, our minds are a part of galactic royalty, but our body is in some sense the stories that unfold on earth. You see the raindrops on the window of your moment, only to see that those raindrops merge. The vision of reality, the ultimate collective being that will be the trust of the eyes that advance our intelligence forth. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in, and I encourage everyone to start writing, but only pick up the pen when an idea is so important to you that if you don't write it, it would escape time. So anyways, guys, keep writing, and if you don't, you're not talking to your future self. Much blessings and namaste.